So Jesus wraps up all of these attitudes and the way that they bring us happiness by talking about the one thing that doesn't seem to make sense that it would make you happy: suffering, being hurt, being set aside because of what you believe in, or what the Bible translates often as being persecuted. And this is the one beatitude, the one attitude that Jesus actually spends the most time talking about. Last time we looked at how he said, "Blessed are you if you're persecuted for righteousness." But Jesus continues this line of thought about persecution, about suffering because of what you believe in. And what's interesting is that he gives so much attention to this. The thing that would actually hurt us, it would actually cause us pain, as a source of joy and source of happiness to us. But maybe you could stop and think of it this way. What are the things, or who are the people in your life that you would suffer for, that you would die for? The things probably that you love, or the people you love, or the things that you believe in. Those are the things that we'd be willing to suffer for and die for. And because Jesus loves us, and because Jesus believes in us, that's why he died for us. That's why he suffered for us. And he ends this list of attitudes that bring us happiness with these two verses in Matthew chapter 5. Let me read. It says, "Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you falsely, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way that they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So it's happened before, and it's going to happen again. And so while there's all of these things that can bring us happiness, that Jesus lists that are different than the world tells us can actually bring us happiness, there are things that happen in our heart, that change our heart, that change our values, that change the essence or core of who we are. They happen in ways that we live differently, and they happen in ways that cause our perspective to change. And so a question has to be, how has Jesus changed our lives? How has he changed our thoughts? How has he changed our perspective? And if all of these changes have happened in line with all of these attitudes that he's talking about in Matthew chapter 5, one of the things that should happen in our life is there would be a greater source of happiness. There would be a greater source of contentment. There would be a greater source of joy, because we've aligned our lives more with his life. And if we're not experiencing that, we have to really step back and ask, how much have we changed because of Jesus? The second question goes back to this idea of suffering. Is we have to realize suffering for Jesus in some way is actually a sign that we're following him. In some countries, it'd be pretty obvious if following Christ was outlawed, and you had no choice. You couldn't do that publicly, and you did do that publicly, and you are arrested or beaten or kicked out of your family because of that. That's pretty obvious in some countries. In other countries, you don't face the same type of suffering or pain for a choice to follow Jesus, but you would in some way. You would be treated differently in some way. You would lose some relationship. There would be some way it would impact you. And so it actually becomes a sign that we're following Jesus like we should. Paul writes this in 2 Timothy 3, verse 21. "Everyone who wants to live a godly life, who belong to Jesus Christ, will suffer from others." Not that we'll look for suffering, but when we look to truly follow Jesus, one of the things that will happen at some point along our lives is that we will suffer. We will be persecuted. We will be treated differently. So that's the biggest question I hope we could end these Beatitudes with, is if we are living in such a way that if we encountered the right situation, the right person, the right time, that we would be persecuted, because it would actually be a confirmation and an affirmation that we're living as we should. Nobody wants to hurt. Nobody wants to suffer. But wouldn't you want to hurt and suffer for Jesus, for the right thing? And if we're living in such a way that Jesus lived when he walked here, at some point we will. And that will tell us exactly what we believe about Jesus. So I hope that could be a thing that you could reflect on today, of how much you truly have changed because of Jesus, and how willing we are to suffer for him, and how much our lives have changed, that if somebody wasn't for God, that they would look at us in such a way and decide that we were worthy of suffering for God as well. Because everybody who lives a godly life will be persecuted in some way. But when that happens, Jesus says, you're going to be happy. God bless.